At 6:47 a.m., a single email confirmation made Serafina Hayes the most powerful civil engineer in the country. At 6:48 a.m., her husband, Marcus, sent a text to his mistress, packed a leather weekender, and walked out on his critically ill daughter. He thought he was escaping a life of sickness and struggle. He had no idea he had just abandoned an empire. The morning Marcus Thorne decided to obliterate his family, he was too consumed by the illicit thrill of a new message to notice the digital tremor that was rewriting his wife's future. The email, with its sterile government heading, certified that Hayes Engineering Solutions, a firm Serafina had bled for, building it from their garage blueprints for 15 agonizing years, had just secured the $50 billion national infrastructure contract. It was the largest government deal in modern history. But Marcus was busy. He was calculating his exit. In the kitchen of their cramped, rented apartment, a move he had insisted on for financial prudence, Serafina Hayes stood as a ghost in her own life. In one hand, she clutched a sheaf of medical invoices from Children's Memorial, a testament to her daughter Lily's brutal fight with leukemia. In the other, she held divorce papers, delivered by a cold-faced courier the evening before. She watched the man she had built, the man whose career she had patiently nurtured with her own connections, load designer suitcases into a car she had co-signed for. He was leaving. He finalized the divorce that afternoon, a sterile, brutal transaction. He signed away his parental rights to Lily, their 7-year-old child, framing her illness as a financial burden he could no longer sustain. He was severing every tie, clearing the deck to marry Alessia Bianchi, a socialite heiress who promised him the COO position and the opulent lifestyle he felt he was owed. But what happens when the dust settles? How does a man who trades his dying daughter for a corner office react when he discovers the failure he discarded now controls a $50 billion empire? And what will Serafina do when the husband who called her worthless stands before her, realizing his new fiancé's fortune is a rounding error compared to the power his ex-wife now wields? Serafina's fingers, stained with the faint orange of antiseptic soap, trembled as she countersigned the consent form for Lily's next round of experimental treatment. Her eyes burned, dry and raw from a week of fractured sleep in a vinyl-coated hospital armchair. Lily lay cocooned in the sterile whiteness of the bed, a small, pale warrior, her 7-year-old frame tethered to a network of tubes and monitors. The leukemia diagnosis had landed like a bomb 18 months prior, in the same catastrophic week that Hayes Engineering Solutions was shortlisted for the federal project. Ever since, Serafina's life had become a dizzying, heartbreaking blur. She lived in a dual reality, one of sterile corridors, the smell of bleach, and hushed, sympathetic doctors, the other of frantic conference calls, geotechnical surveys, and 3 a.m. proposal revisions. She'd written code in waiting rooms, taken calls from senators while holding Lily's hand through the nausea of chemo, and poured every remaining ounce of her soul into the two things that mattered, her daughter's survival and the contract that could pay for it. Marcus had been present at first, or at least his body had been. He'd brought coffee, nodded at doctors, and sighed with practiced gravity. But his presence had evaporated like water on hot pavement. His late nights at the office became more frequent, his excuses more elaborate, his irritation a tangible thing in the room whenever Lily's treatment schedules conflicted with his social calendar. The apartment Marcus had forced them into felt like a pressure cooker in the pre-dawn gloom. Serafina had fought him on leaving their modest suburban house, a home with a yard where Lily had once been healthy enough to play. But Marcus had been relentless, painting a grim picture of their finances, citing necessary sacrifices and the drain of her passion project on their savings. She had relented, consumed by Lily's health, believing his concern was for their family. She didn't see it for what it was, step one of his meticulously planned extraction. He was already building his new life with Alessia Bianchi, a daughter of the formidable Antonio Bianchi, CEO of Bianchi Global Industries. Serafina had met Alessia once at a sterile corporate fundraiser. She'd noted the effortless way Alessia wore her wealth, the casual drape of diamonds on her wrist. She'd watched Marcus's eyes, hungry and assessing, linger too long. Serafina had dismissed the cold prickle of unease as paranoia, a symptom of her profound exhaustion. Now, the memory felt like a betrayal. She spooned instant coffee into a chipped mug, the bitter grounds a poor substitute for real rest. The city outside was a smear of gray and nascent light. On her laptop screen, the government procurement portal showed a single, bold notification. But her mind, thick with fatigue and fear, couldn't process it. Lily had been in pain most of the night, a deep, radiating ache in her bones that the morphine couldn't fully touch. Serafina had held her, rocking and singing a tune from a childhood she could barely remember, whispering promises of recovery, promises she prayed weren't lies, even as her own world was being systematically dismantled. Marcus hadn't come home. Again. His text sent at 2:14 a.m. was a masterpiece of cold efficiency. Working late, don't wait up. She had stopped waiting weeks ago. She'd stopped expecting him to take a shift at the hospital, stopped hoping he'd ask about the proposal that represented the culmination of her entire professional life. He no longer saw her. He saw only the burdens she carried. Across the street, a faded billboard advertised luxury condominiums, a life of sleek, sterile perfection that felt like a cruel joke. She remembered the early days, the fire in her belly when she first launched her firm. Marcus had seemed so proud. My wife, he'd boom at parties, she's going to redesign the future. But that pride had soured, curdling into a sharp, constant resentment as her work demanded more, as Lily's illness devoured their savings, as the life of effortless wealth he envisioned failed to materialize on his timeline. He'd started making comments, small at first, then sharper. Why are you killing yourself for contracts that never land? He'd ask. Why not just get a stable job at a big firm? This dream of yours is costing us everything. When he finally walked through the door that evening, the air in the small apartment crackled with his toxic energy. He didn't just enter a room, he invaded it. His briefcase hit the floor with a thud. His tie was yanked loose with a gesture of violent impatience. He barely glanced at the complex color-coded medication schedule Serafina maintained on the refrigerator. She was in the kitchen, dicing vegetables for a simple soup. Their grocery budget had been stripped bare by co-pays and prescription costs. She could feel his judgment, a physical weight, pressing on her from across the room. This, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. He gestured at the cramped room, the secondhand furniture, the looming stack of blue and white medical bills on the counter. This is what we are. This struggle, this poverty. I can't do this anymore, Serafina. Her hand holding the knife froze. Marcus, please, the decision on the federal project is due any day. If we get this, if, his fist slammed the cheap particle board table, making the plates rattle. That's the only song you know. If the contract comes through, if Lily gets better, if we can just hold on. I am done holding on, Serafina. I'm holding on to nothing. She turned, the knife still in her hand, and faced him. The man she'd loved, the father of her child, was gone. A bitter, entitled stranger stood in his place. Lily needs us, she whispered, her voice raw. She needs both of us. The treatments are showing promise, the doctor said. Lily needs a father who isn't drowning in her mother's failures. He spat, though his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. The cruelty was surgical. I've been offered a position, a real position, Chief Operating Officer at Bianchi Global. A cold, heavy dread settled in Serafina's stomach, colder than the fear, colder than the exhaustion. The Bianchi family? Alessia Bianchi's father? His jaw tightened, a flash of defensive pride in his eyes. Yes, Alessia recommended me. She sees my potential. She sees what I'm worth. Unlike some people who only see a checkbook to fund their failing hobbies. The injustice of it was staggering. Serafina had personally introduced him to the contacts that landed him his current job. She had coached him through interviews, edited his reports, and championed his advancements, all while juggling her own burgeoning company and later a critically ill child. And now he stood in the apartment he demanded, funded by the failing hobby he so despised, and called her a failure. What are you saying, Marcus? She asked, though the answer was already screaming in her ears. I'm saying I want out, he declared, his voice gaining strength. I want a divorce. The Bianchis, they think I'm driven, unattached. Antonio is already talking about me as his successor, about bringing me into the family, being married to this. He waved his hand again at her, at the apartment, at the life she was fighting to hold together. It ruins everything. Her vision blurred. She gripped the counter to stay upright. Lily, She's your daughter. She is fighting for her life, and you're leaving her for a job? I'll pay child support, he said, the line delivered with the sterile finality of a man who had rehearsed it. But I cannot be tethered to this life. Alessia and her family can give me the future I've earned. Don't make this any harder than it has to be. He was on within the hour. That night, after he'd packed his expensive suits and left his key on the counter, Serafina sat in the darkness of Lily's room. She watched the rhythmic pulse of the oximeter, the heartbreaking network of tubes that kept her daughter tethered to this world. She had spent years trying to make Marcus happy, promising herself that if she just worked harder, sacrificed more, she could fix his dissatisfaction. But watching Lily's small chest rise and fall, a profound, chilling clarity settled over her. Her daughter was all that mattered. Her daughter, and the contract that could save them both. The next morning, with Lily sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, Serafina finally clicked the notification that had been waiting since Marcus had slammed the door on their life. Her hands shook. She read the email once, then twice, a third time. The words on the screen seemed to swim to belong to another reality. Pleased to inform Hayes Engineering Solutions that you have been awarded the National Infrastructure Modernization Project. $50 billion, 10-year engagement, visionary design and sustainable solutions. She had won. After 15 years of being underestimated, of fighting for every grant, every small contract, of being the only woman in a room full of dismissive men, she had won. A hysterical laugh bubbled in her throat. Her first instinct, a deep cellular habit, was to call Marcus, to scream with joy, to celebrate, to share this impossible moment with the man who had been her partner for 12 years. But Marcus was gone. As if summoned by the thought, a courier arrived. This time it wasn't a corporate envelope. It was a legal one. The divorce papers, officially filed. He wanted nothing. No alimony, no claim to her failing business, no assets. And in the most brutal line item, he was surrendering his parental rights to Lily, citing the undue burden of catastrophic medical costs and his inability to provide adequate care. The paperwork was a scorched earth maneuver designed to sever him from his past, to erase his family like a bad investment. Serafina sat on the floor of the hospital cafeteria, the $50 billion contract notification glowing on her tablet, the divorce papers stark and white on the table. Two irreconcilable realities coexisting in a single, devastating moment. Lily was upstairs receiving a blood transfusion, and Serafina Hayes had just become one of the wealthiest, most powerful contractors in the nation. She had never felt so profoundly alone. She could call him. She could pick up the phone and detonate his new life before it even began. Tell him what he'd just thrown away. But something stopped her, a cold, hard kernel of pride. Or perhaps the sudden, terrible realization that a man who could quantify his daughter's life as a financial burden didn't deserve to share in this. He didn't deserve to even know. Instead, she called her attorney, then her accountant, then the small, loyal team of engineers who had stayed with her through the years of ramen noodle budgets and impossible deadlines. Within 3 hours, the news was public. The financial world convulsed. Hayes Engineering Solutions, a boutique firm, wins impossible $50 by bid. Serafina Hayes was hailed as a visionary, a genius. Her phone didn't just ring, it detonated. Interview requests from every major network, partnership offers from global corporations, personal congratulations from the governor and 3 senators. Her company's value became stratospheric overnight. And for Marcus, silence. He was unreachable, already embedded in his new life. Serafina learned through the grapevine, the shocked whispers of former mutual friends, that his engagement to Alessia Bianchi had been announced at an exclusive party at the Bianchi estate. It had happened the same night he'd left Serafina. He had proposed with a ring that cost more than a year of Lily's chemotherapy. The wedding was set for 6 weeks' time, a lavish, no expense spared affair. Antonio Bianchi had made good on his promise. Marcus was already listed as COO on the company's website. He had gotten everything he wanted. Serafina's world has been shattered and rebuilt in the same 24 hours. She has the power to save her daughter and build a new future. But the man who was supposed to be her partner is celebrating a new life built on a foundation of lies. What would you do in her position? Let us know in the comments. And if you're hooked on this story of betrayal and resilience, subscribe to Apex Tales. You won't believe what she does next. Serafina threw herself into her work with a ferocity that bordered on possession. Her new life was a structured, high-stakes ballet. She managed Lily's treatment schedule from new, gleaming corporate offices, hiring the world's top pediatric oncologists with her contract signing bonus. She moved them out of the cramped apartment and into a sun-drenched penthouse condominium, sterile and secure, closer to the hospital. There were bedrooms flooded with natural light, a kitchen that didn't feel like a cage, and air that didn't smell of despair. Lily's doctors, now the best in the world, were cautiously optimistic. The new treatment protocol, funded entirely by Serafina, was working. The leukemia was, for the first time, in retreat. Her daughter was slowly, miraculously improving. Then the invitation arrived. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, a courier delivered a box. Inside, resting on velvet, was the wedding invitation. Heavy, cream-colored cardstock, embossed gold lettering. Alessia Bianchi and Marcus Thorne request the honor of your presence. She stared at it for hours. This artifact of her betrayal made tangible and elegant. Her best friend, Jenna, found her that evening, sitting in the dark, the invitation crumpled in her fist, silent tears tracking through the makeup she hadn't bothered to remove. "You're not going," Jenna stated, her voice fierce. She snatched the invitation and threw it into the recycling bin. "Absolutely not. He doesn't deserve to see you. He doesn't deserve the air you breathe." But Serafina shook her head, a strange cold resolve crystallizing inside her. "I have to go, Jenna. I need to see it. I need to watch him marry her. I need to see with my own eyes what he chose over Lily, over me. Maybe then I can finally close this door." The morning of the wedding, Jenna arrived with a garment bag and a makeup case. The dress was a deep midnight blue silk, elegant, severe, and powerful. It was the armor Serafina needed. "If you're going to walk into the lion's den," Jenna declared, skillfully applying mascara, "you're going to walk in as the queen." Serafina looked at her reflection. The exhausted, hollowed-out woman from the hospital vigil was gone. In her place was someone else, someone forged in fire. She saw strength. She saw resilience. She saw the CEO of a $50 billion enterprise. The Bianchi estate was an obscene display of generational wealth. Sprawling, manicured gardens choked with white roses, a marble-floored mansion that swallowed guests whole. Crystal chandeliers dripped from vaulted ceilings, and the air hummed with the quiet, confident buzz of the ultra-rich. Serafina's arrival parted the crowd. She felt their stares, heard the sharp intake of breath, the frantic whispers. "Who is that?" "That's Serafina Hayes, the infrastructure mogul. But that's Marcus Thorne's ex-wife. What is she doing here?" She stood at the back of the grand hall, Jenna's hand a tight, grounding presence in hers, and watched Marcus at the altar. He wore a custom tuxedo, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked polished, triumphant, and ecstatic. He was every inch the successful executive he had always dreamed of being. When Alessia appeared, a vision in $50,000 of couture lace, Marcus's face lit up with a blinding ambition that Serafina had, for 12 years, tragically mistaken for love. They exchanged vows. Serafina couldn't hear the words, only the sickening cadence of promises that should have been sacred. Words that meant nothing to a man who had broken them so effortlessly, so completely. At the reception, the whispers intensified. Marcus had seen her. His face, for a split second, had drained of all color before he masked it with a brittle smile, turning back to his bride. Alessia, radiant and oblivious, suspected nothing. Serafina accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, her composure a perfect, impenetrable mask, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. She had come for closure. She had come to prove to herself that his choice could not and would not destroy her. Marcus's mother, Eleanor Thorne, materialized at her elbow. Her eyes were chips of ice. "You have no right to be here," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "Haven't you embarrassed my son enough? He's moved on. He's with a better family now. Don't you dare cause a scene." Serafina met her gaze, her own voice steady and cold. "I have no intention of causing trouble, Eleanor. I merely came to wish Marcus the happiness he deserves. I'm leaving shortly." But before she could turn, Antonio Bianchi, the patriarch, stepped up to the microphone. His voice, rich and commanding, silenced the room. Good evening, he began, smiling warmly at the crowd. We are here to celebrate family, to celebrate trust. In my life, in my business, I have found that integrity is the only currency that truly matters. Serafina felt Jenna tense beside her. Something in the air had shifted. And before we celebrate this union, Antonio continued, his expression hardening almost imperceptibly, I must address something that has been brought to my attention. I built my company, my family's name, on a foundation of absolute honesty. I expect nothing less from those who would join my family. The room was utterly silent. Alessia turned to her father, a flicker of confusion on her perfect face. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. My new COO and future son-in-law, Marcus Thorne, Antonio said, his voice dropping, presented himself to my daughter and me as a single, ambitious professional, a man free of attachments. Antonio's gaze swept the room and locked on to Marcus. He failed to mention, however, that he was married for 12 years. He failed to mention that he has a 7-year-old daughter, a daughter who is, at this very moment, fighting leukemia. He failed to mention that he filed for divorce and abandoned his sick child just weeks ago to pursue this new life. A collective horrified gasp rippled through the ballroom. Every eye snapped to Marcus, then, inevitably, to Serafina, who stood frozen at the back, a silent, damning testament. Marcus was shaking his head, frantic, whispering, Antonio, no, it's not. But Antonio wasn't finished. His ex-wife, he announced, gesturing with an open palm towards the back of the room, is here with us tonight. As some of you have recognized, that is Serafina Hayes, the founder of Hayes Engineering Solutions. The name landed with the weight of a physical blow. The woman, Antonio continued, his voice like steel, who just won the largest infrastructure contract in United States history, a $50 billion deal. An announcement I learned that was made public the same day Mr. Thorne divorced her for being, and I quote, a financial drain. The second gasp was louder, sharper. This was no longer a scandal. It was a public execution. The same woman, Antonio boomed, who used her own professional connections to advance his career for years. The woman who bore the entire burden of their child's illness alone while he was courting my daughter. I cannot in good conscience welcome into my family a man who builds his future on lies, a man who abandons his blood, his responsibilities to chase wealth, a man who discards loyalty like it's last season's fashion. Antonio looked at Marcus, his eyes filled with a cold, final contempt. The COO position is rescinded. This marriage is canceled. Marcus Thorne, you are no longer welcome in my home, my company, or my family. The ballroom erupted. It was chaos. Alessia was sobbing, her mother holding her as she stared at Marcus with eyes of shattered betrayal. Guests were whispering frantically, their judgment, once aimed at Serafina, now laser-focused on the humiliated groom. Marcus stood alone at the altar, his carefully constructed world reduced to rubble in less than 5 minutes. His face was a mask of disbelief, rage, and profound public humiliation. Serafina remained still. She felt a strange, quiet vindication, but no joy. There was no joy in this. There was only the ugly, necessary light of truth. Jenna squeezed her hand hard. Alessia, mascara streaming down her face, broke away from her mother and walked directly to Serafina. I'm so sorry, Alessia whispered, her voice choked. He told me. He said you were toxic, that you tried to trap him, that you were bleeding him dry. I believed him. Oh God, your daughter. How could he leave her? Serafina's voice was steady, devoid of malice. Money can't fix a dishonest heart, Alessia. I hope you find someone worthy of yours. Antonio Bianchi approached next, his expression one of deep, professional respect. Mrs. Hayes, Serafina, I apologize for the role my family unwittingly played in your pain. Your integrity, your resilience, it's remarkable. If there is anything my firm can do for yours. Nothing is needed, Mr. Bianchi, Serafina said gently. I came for closure. I believe I found it. I'm going home to my daughter now. As she turned to leave, the crowd parted for her like the sea. The earlier whispers of mockery had transformed into a silent, stunned admiration. She walked out of the mansion, head held high, Jenna at her side. Surprisingly, Alessia followed them to the entrance, clutching her ruined veil. Can I visit? She asked, her voice small. Your daughter? Can I help with her treatment? Your company? Anything? Serafina studied the younger woman, seeing past the diamonds and the drama. She saw genuine, agonizing remorse. When the dust settles, Alessia, she said not unkindly, if you truly want to help, come to the children's hospital. Lily loves visitors, especially visitors who bring books about dragons. In the weeks that followed, Serafina's story became a legend. It echoed through the business community and beyond. She was the woman discarded for poverty who emerged a titan, the mother who fought for her child while her husband chased an heiress, the engineer who built an empire while the man who called her a failure fell from grace. Interview requests flooded her office. She declined them all. Her focus was singular. Lily, whose treatment was showing unprecedented success, and her company, which was now hiring hundreds, its workforce expanding to meet the colossal demands of the federal contract. Alessia Bianchi appeared at the Children's Hospital 3 weeks later. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her arms full of dragon books, her face scrubbed free of makeup. She looked nothing like the glamorous bride. She and Serafina talked quietly while Lily slept. An unexpected, fragile understanding bloomed between them. Alessia had been deceived, yes, but she was also deeply, genuinely remorseful. And she was determined to make amends. Antonio Bianchi followed his daughter's lead. He met with Serafina, not as a penitent, but as a businessman. His company specialized in advanced materials and manufacturing, hers in design and engineering. Together, they could revolutionize the sector. Serafina listened, her face impassive. She remembered how Marcus had seen the Bianchis as his golden ticket, never realizing that true, lasting success wasn't married into, it was built. I'll consider it, Serafina said, but not as a favor. If we partner, it's because our companies complement each other, because the work is better for it. I built everything I have on merit, Mr. Bianchi. I won't compromise that now. Antonio smiled, a genuine smile of respect. I would expect anything less, Mrs. Hayes. That's precisely why I'm proposing it. The Hayes-Bianchi partnership formed slowly, meticulously, built on steel-clad professionalism rather than personal drama. Alessia became a regular, quiet presence in Serafina's life. She visited Lily weekly, not as a patronizing socialite, but as a friend. She used her family's vast connections to spearhead a new pediatric cancer research fund, channeling her guilt and her privilege into tangible action. Serafina, at first suspicious, began to see the genuine character beneath the heiress facade. Marcus, meanwhile, had vanished, only to resurface in Serafina's inbox. His text began as furious, rambling accusations, blaming her for his downfall, insisting she had orchestrated his humiliation. When she didn't respond, the tone shifted. The anger melted into desperation, then into pathetic, groveling pleas. He showed up at her new office building once, unshaven and frantic, but security turned him away. Finally, 6 months after the wedding that never was, a message came. Meet me at Riverside Park, the bench, the place where he had proposed to her 13 years ago. Serafina almost deleted it. Lily was in remission. Her hair was growing back, a soft, downy fuzz. Her laughter, once a rare, precious sound, now filled their beautiful new home. The Hayes-Bianchi partnership was thriving, creating thousands of jobs and revolutionizing infrastructure across 3 states. Serafina's life had moved on. Marcus was a ghost, a painful memory she had worked hard to exorcise. But something in the message, a tone of absolute final brokenness, pulled at her. She needed to close this chapter, not for him, for her. He looked horrific. She found him on their old bench, staring at the river. The expensive suit was rumpled and stained. His hair was unkempt, his eyes hollow and defeated. The confident, arrogant executive was gone, replaced by a shell of a man who had gambled his soul and lost. Serafina, he started, his voice cracking. He couldn't even look at her. I'm so sorry for everything. For Lily, for leaving, for being so blind, so stupid, so selfish. I threw it all away, didn't I? Everything that mattered, I threw it away for nothing. She sat on the other end of the bench, leaving a careful, symbolic distance between them. I forgive you, Marcus. He looked up, a desperate, pathetic hope in his eyes. I forgive you, she continued, her voice quiet but firm. Not for you, for me. Because carrying that anger, that hate, it only hurts me. It only takes up space that I need for Lily, for my work, for my life. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. You made your choices. You showed me exactly who you are, and I believe you. I've lost everything, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. My job, my reputation. Alessia, her father, Antonio has blacklisted me. No one in the industry will even take my call. And Lily, his voice broke completely. I abandoned my daughter, my own daughter when she needed me. What kind of monster does that? The kind who valued ambition over love, Serafina said, not cruelly, but as a statement of fact. The kind who saw his family as obstacles instead of his anchor. You didn't lose everything, Marcus. You traded it. You traded us for what you thought was a better deal. And you learned too late that your wife and your daughter can't be bought or rebuilt. Can I see her? He asked, the word a desperate plea. Please, Serafina, just once. I know I don't deserve it, but you signed away your rights, she reminded him, her voice inflexible. You legally, voluntarily chose to stop being her father. She's doing well now, Marcus, thriving, and I will not, under any circumstances, disrupt her healing with your guilt. Maybe someday, when she's an adult and if she wants to know you, that will be her choice, but not now, not like this. He nodded, a gut-wrenching sob escaping him. He was truly broken. Serafina felt a profound pity, but no satisfaction. His punishment was his life. His punishment was living every day with the choices he had made. That was justice enough. I hope you find a way to rebuild your life, Marcus, she said, standing up. I truly do. I hope you learn what worth really means. It's not in a title or a bank account. It's integrity. It's perseverance. It's showing up for the people who need you. But you'll have to learn that on your own. Goodbye, Marcus. She walked away, feeling lighter than she had in years. She left him on the bench where he had once promised her forever. The promises were ash, but she had kept her own. Her promises to Lily, to herself, to the work that defined her. She had taken the pain of his betrayal and forged it into power. She had taken his abandonment and built an empire. And she had learned that the love she'd lost had simply been making room for something infinitely better. Self-respect, purpose, and a future she had built bolt by bolt on her own terms. 6 months later, Hayes Engineering Solutions opened its 5th regional office. To mark the occasion, Serafina took the company public. It was Lily, her hair now in short, bright curls, who rang the ceremonial bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Alessia Bianchi stood with them, no longer an heiress or a mistress, but a true friend and the head of the Hayes Bianchi Pediatric Cancer Foundation. Jenna was there too, weeping with pride, the loyal companion who had never wavered. The photographers captured the image, 3 women from vastly different paths, united by a trial that had tested and forged them into something stronger. Serafina's story became a legend in business schools, a case study in resilience, ethical leadership, and the strategic value of integrity. But to her, it was simply the truth. It was proof that betrayal cannot destroy a person who is rooted in their own self-worth, that real power comes from building, not from taking, and that sometimes the greatest revenge is to build a life so magnificent, so full of purpose, that the past and the people who wronged you simply can't touch it. She had been discarded as worthless, and she had proven her worth beyond measure, not for Marcus's benefit and not for the world's, but for her own. Serafina Hayes didn't just rebuild her life. She built an empire from the ashes of betrayal. She proved that true power isn't taken, it's earned. For more stories where the overlooked become unforgettable, subscribe to Apex Tales and discover the apex of human resilience.